This was a back gate which was in need of a repair. The hinges were rusted and come away from the timber. After trying to open it, it just fell apart, so the size of the doorway was measured and a new door was to be made. But first the design was created using a CAD system or computer aid design in 3D application called SketchUp. Here we can see the start of the design, 3 dimensions, height, width and length. First the icon is removed and a new 2-dimensional object is drawn out on the workspace. And here we can see the size of the object. It was decided to make the new gate using treated timber that measured 150mm by 25mm. We can see here that the object was too small for the screen, so it was magnified. The next thing was to give the object some height. And the height of the door was to be 1945mm. This caused the object to be stretched off the screen, so the workspace was reduced to allow the object to fully appear on the screen. We can now see the 3 dimensions of the timber, and this was converted into a group so it would be a totally independent object, just like a timber board in real life. The width of the door was 750mm, so the first board was copied to give us a total width of 300mm, then again for a width of 450mm, and so on until there were 5 boards at 150mm, giving us a total of 750mm. Once again, we can view these objects in any angle. The design needed to have 3 cross members to hold the 5 boards together, so again one of them was copied, then rotated. It was then placed along the top of the 5 boards. The problem here is that the boards are all on the same X, Y, Z axis. So they all occupy the same space. We can see this here. The top board needs pulling out as shown so it rests on the other boards. Here we can see that it is still part of the XYZ axis, so some small adjustment had to be made and aligned. The length of the board needed to be the same width of the 5 boards, so it was shortened. Once again we can view our door from any angle. The design called for 3 cross members, one at the top, one at the bottom and one in the middle. Using the tape measure, it was calculated that the middle board would be about 743mm from the top board. This leaves a small marker and the middle board was moved to this new position. The next board was to be positioned at a diagonal, so the top board was copied, then lengthened. Since it was to be diagonal, it was rotated. The next part is to cut the shape of the board, so a pencil mark was used on one of the surfaces of the board, then at the other end. The board was then removed and the pencil line continued around the board. Now the area that was marked was removed. The offcut was then removed as before. This board was then repositioned and copied for a second diagonal board. Next the hinges. These were rotated for the correct orientation and placed on the door. Because of the weight of the door, it was decided to use 3 heavy-duty hinges. Next was a deadbolt. Then a handle. Once again, this had to be rotated and adjusted for the right location. Finally, the objects were coloured in wood and metal effects. We can now see the final design that can be viewed from any angle. This allows us to create a final look and, more important, a shopping list for the items we shall be using. First, the items were collected from the timber merchants. Since it was to be a simple design, it was decided to build the door on site. The 5 doors screwed together using cross members, then the diagonal pieces cut and screwed. The size of the door was then cut to size. A second diagonal piece was cut and screwed into position, and the door was complete without the fittings. Part of the door frame was also badly damaged. It was decided to replace it. The door was planed for the correct size, and the hinges, door handle and bolt all mounted on the door.